I was working in a clothing store back in the days, like maybe 8 years ago, and doing music on the side. And then the whole aeroplane thing started working pretty well. And I was spending more days on the road than actually at work, so I had to beg every week to get days off so I could go and play as a DJ and make music. And that's when I had to take the decision to quit my job and do music as a full-time job, which was obviously perfect for me. It was amazing that I was actually able to do that at some point in my life. It's just the day I left the store was really epic and really, it was like in movies. I really put down my stuff and I said bye and just walked out the door and never went back. And they were like threatening me, yeah, but you're gonna have trouble. The government's gonna give you any money. And I was like, I'm making music, I'm a musician. Finally, after 15 years of hustling, trying to be one, so it didn't really matter. It was pretty scary because you don't know, you can just count on yourself and you don't know if that's actually gonna last, but it wasn't more scary than it was enjoyable to finally be able to do that. And I thought if I managed to get to this point while having a full-time day job, what can I actually achieve if I work all day, every day on music? It's obviously gonna be better. I used to live in the south of Belgium in a really small town where it was pretty much closed from the music business, from clubs, etc., etc. So I was doing the Aeroplane music there. And when the gigs started coming and the gigs started becoming bigger, it was really a shock to come back from wherever countryside I was living at, and then already like walking in a club where everybody knows songs you've made and everybody knows the mixes you've put out, and like it's really kind of confronting, and at the same time it's really enjoyable again. But it's weird. In the beginning it's really weird, and I guess you never really get used to it. Even still today, when people come to me and say, I've listened to this, or I remember your remix you did 4 years ago, like to have people following you and to actually witness it, it's still pretty weird. And it's still pretty strange to me because, again, we spend most of our time locked into studios and into these tiny rooms, so we're not really connected to that part unless, when you go and play a gig, which is a small amount of the job, really. An important part of the job, but a small amount in hours of the job. When Aeroplane started, it's been classified straight away as a new disco act, which was fine then because I've been listening to a lot of that music before. But if you analyze it right now, it wasn't new disco. It was right after. For me, new disco was more Lindstrom and Prince Thomas, the beginning, like I Feel Space, the first Tortilla records, etc., etc. All these records were like maybe some old metro area. All that was new disco to me. And I feel like Aeroplane kind of got influenced by that. And we didn't really make new disco as they made it. I really think it was really pop music and cinematic music produced in some electronic and disco-y way. But I don't think we can be really put in the new disco thing, as it was also really a club music. It was really influenced by krautrock, and it was really repetitive, and like Aeroplane came with pop structures pretty much instantly, with like verses, choruses. So it got a bit annoying to be classified in new disco because we just were stuck into that really small box. And then after new disco came Balearic, which was even worse than anything else, because it was even a smaller box inside another small box. So you had like even less freedom to make music you wanted. I like so many different styles and so many different genres that it's really impossible for me to be really stuck into this Balearic. And also Balearic as a genre of music also doesn't really work for me, because the proper definition of it is a mix of different genres that were played in a certain place, and that was what was called Balearic. So in that definition of the word, I can agree, and I'm actually more than happy to agree on it. But Balearic as a journalist-created genre, that I'm not 100% okay with that. in those being classified in those genre, and coming up with a track like the remix we did for Friendly Fire Paris back then, it made it really difficult to play as a DJ sometimes, because you were booked, because you were famous or known for a certain track, you were booked in bigger parties, you were booked as a headliner, but then you were put in front of 2,000 kids that were only expecting sirens and breakdowns, and we were playing back then 114 BPM, you know, kind of like chill disco music and really sexy, and so it put me in really difficult situations, like playing Cambisco after Roscoe at like 3 a.m. and closing the festival in front of 2,000 drunk and really hyperactive kids. So that wasn't, I managed to finally work it out, but then you have to get out of that new disco, Balearic, whatever genre you were put in. And then if there's hardcore fans in the room, that's the one that are going to be disappointed, because they came to hear what they know you for, but then you have to choose between making 100 fans happy or making 2,000 people dance. So it's really a difficult situation. You try to do a bit of both, and that's when it becomes complicated. With experience, I finally managed to find records that can work for both crowds, and to build a reputation as a DJ that actually allows me to play either way, new disco, slower jams and slower tracks and something a bit more cosmic, as well as playing a really big like house tune, and it will work. Yeah, both can work. I had one issue. It happened only once, because usually, you know, even if I start slower and they were expecting more upbeat music, I always finish with more dance music. And I've realized that people will always remember the last 3 records of your set. That's the one they go home with. So that's the one that matter and they remember. But only once there was a period where I got kind of bored of playing the Paris remix, and I started playing it as the first track. I was opening my set with it, so you instantly knew what was going on. If people were screaming, you knew they knew what it was. If nobody was actually noticing anything, you knew you could play whatever you wanted. People in the room had no idea who you were. And one day I was playing in Jakarta, I think, and I opened with the Paris remix, and I think that's something ready for it. They had like girls that were meant to come, and I think the guy got really upset because he wasn't expecting me to open with. So I don't think he was ready for whatever needed to happen that night. So that's the only time somebody complained about an Aeroplane DJ set. I hope it will be the only time. I didn't know much about music producing at all, because I've learned music. I haven't learned production or sound in any ways. So I didn't know anything about it. Unfortunately, me being pretty hard to work with somebody, being an only child, it's really hard for me to collaborate. Anyway, I was pretty much stuck by myself making music, so I had to learn the process of recording, mixing, editing, whatever. And through the years, I actually had these moments where I was like, why doesn't this work? How does he get that sound? Blah, blah, blah. So I've read a lot of books. I've used the internet many times. Still every day, I Google stuff, how to do this in Pro Tools, how to like achieve this result, blah, blah, blah. Like every single day I learn things. But the biggest thing I've learned, and this is gonna sound like a cliche, but it's definitely true, is that whenever you make music, everything you know, you kind of have to unlearn it whenever you actually get to use it. Because with final mixing, for example, I'm pretty bad at final mixing, but I know everything about final mixing. I can tell you how to mix a track from A to Z, but I can't mix a track, which is really weird. So once you start that process and once you start mixing a track, you have to keep it in the back of your head, all that technical knowledge you have, because when you're gonna need it, you have to be able to just identify the problem, know what tool to use, and then fix whatever you have to fix. But if you don't keep your brain focused on the music, that's when you make all the mistakes, and that's when you ruin a track instead of actually fixing it. And that applies for everything. That applies with programming a synth sound, Or like, I used to be like, okay, whatever, this will do. I will edit it in Pro Tools. I will put some effects on it. I will tune it. I will do this and this and that. But then it never works out. So you have to always be musically relevant in anything you do. And that's pretty much the biggest thing I've learned by working with people who actually have experience, is that I don't know how to explain this. They have so much experience, but they don't seem like they do, because it's always at the service of the music. And so today, yeah, I kind of have to play dumb whenever I'm in a studio, because that's the only way to actually stop focusing on cables, grounded, not grounded, whatever, MIDI, delay. All these technical things our brain is polluted with, to actually get back to making music. And the last year, with the building of the studio, and with having to learn so many things, and having to learn everything about balanced cables, and everything about semi-balanced cables, and all this crap they give to you in manuals, that's when I've lost the fun of making music. And thank God now, for the last 3 or 4 months, I kind of like got back into that, into enjoying it. So if I had to pick 3 people who influenced me the most in music making, in no specific order, and for different reasons, one of the first one would be Daft Punk, because it's, I mean, I don't know how they do it. It's just every time they do something, everybody's trying to sound like them, but nobody actually does. Like, you can get close, you can kind of imitate it, but nobody actually gets not even close to sound the way they do. And that's also how I got into electronic music. I was listening to like hard rock and grunge and like Nirvana and that stuff. And one of my friends at the time had homework as a gift, and he was like, I don't want this. It's not rock. You can have it. And so that's the first time I was like, whoa, really hit by electronic music. And since then, I'm still trying to make everything I do sound like Face to Face, which I'm really far off, and most of the time I'd rather take a completely different road, because I'm like, if I can't make it to sound like that, I'd rather make it sound completely different than people realizing that I tried to do that and I actually can't achieve it. So yeah, in terms of sound and of how to actually make something simple, but that's also really relevant and really smart, yeah, for me, that's the best at that. Somebody else that also really influenced me, but more in terms of songwriting, would be somebody like Giorgio Moroder. And I've met him once and actually realized he's more of a composer than an actual synth nerd, or like, he's actually writing music more than he was using any of those synths. Well, he was back then, because that's all he had pretty much. But yeah, I really love everything he's ever composed, and everything he did for Donna Summer, everything he did for Midnight Express, for Scarface, for Top Gun, for example. It's an amazing song. So yeah, it's a really, again, clever songwriting, but still accessible to everybody, as probably all the gold records he has can prove it. And another person would be, this would be more in the past couple of years, would be Nile Rodgers. More as a producer that can take a song that is just a song and turn it into what he turns it into. And if you look at his career, I mean, everybody he's ever produced and everybody he's ever worked with had #1 hits. And if you read his book that was out not so long ago, it's crazy how he turned like Diana Ross's career into what a career became, even when nobody was actually believing in what he was doing. And he has this signature where he has, again, because he's a jazz musician, where he has to simplify the music he has in his head to actually make it match commercial standards, but by still keeping it interesting musically. That's something that's really, really hard to achieve, and he did it perfectly for this entire career.